this particular uh, webinar. So I hope you agree to that while we do this. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar, this MDF and Equimundo webinar. This is the first time we do a webinar like this together with another organization, because we think this is a great initiative that they have been developing, and the focus with that organization within Equimundo is on bringing men to the table when it comes to gender, and that's also one of the reasons that we do this, because we work a lot on theories of change. We do gender mainstreaming courses, yeah, and we see that often the perspective is on women only. So we are happy to have Equimundo on board. But first, let us introduce ourselves a little bit to know who will be leading this webinar. And I'm giving the floor to Wessel. Wessel, please go ahead.
Thank you, Sam. Good morning, good afternoon, and perhaps good evening, everyone. My name is Wessel van den Berg. I am based in Cape Town, South Africa. I am the father of 2 children and the partner to my wife. And I also work as the Senior Advocacy Officer at Equimundo Center for Masculinities and Social Justice. And I'm very involved in the MenCare caregiving campaign. So really happy to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. Should I pass back to you, Sam?
Yeah, please. That's fine. Thank you, Wessel. So we have Wessel here, and we have Alev, and Alev will be interviewing Wessel on behalf of MDF. So Alev, the floor is yours to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. My name is Alev Kayagil. I'm a trainer and consultant at MDF, and I work and train on theory of change methodology and integrating some views on how to look at gender and inclusion in developing theories of change. And very excited for this conversation today. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Alev. Those are the 2 main people of this webinar. I will just be making sure that we will go through the whole process. Yeah, but maybe a little bit more again about why we do this. Because, well, Alev already pointed out, hey, we do trainings on theory of change, and we have been using a video by MenCare, by Equimundo for quite a number of years now, and we think it is a great video that shows very well or you can use it very well to show what the theory of change is all about. So, and we opt for a conversation format, an interview format with Wessel, because we would like to take you through various steps of theories of change, thinking at least, so that people realize that theories of change are not just theoretical things or things that or models that you need to use for developing a project. It is about why do we think change happens and what are our dreams that we are pursuing. Yeah, so before we dive a little bit deeper and go for the interview, I would like to ask Wessel to share a small video on their organization and what it is that they're doing. So Wessel, I hope you managed to share your video. So let's see if we can make this happen. And then we go to the interview part afterwards. Thank you, Wessel.
What does manhood mean? How do we reach men and boys to be allies for equality and to be our best selves? At Equimundo, we study masculinity, we measure it, and we listen to how boys and men talk about it. We look at how it's presented on television and online. In the US and internationally, about 2/3 of young men tell us their parents, their peers, partners, society in general, promote a version of manhood that goes like this: that real men must outperform the other at all costs, that men shouldn't stop and ask for help when they're vulnerable, that sex is about conquest, that you have to show that you're tough, that using violence is an acceptable way to get what you want.
We believe that this vision of manhood is structural, systemic, and personal, that it hurts everyone, women, but also men.
And that we all deserve a world where we do not raise our boys to only be independent,
but also to see their interdependence, their duty, their noble purpose in being connected to others and caring about them.
We believe in a world where men can be called out and also called in.
Where dads center care and their kids' future when showing up to vote. and where doing things like a dad or like a man means doing them with kindness, affection, and warmth.
That is why our work promotes care by men and boys for others and for themselves. We see care as the antidote to violence, inequity, and a key to achieving well-being for all.
We do this first by building on our research that looks to understand the why and how of people's attitudes toward gender equality and manhood and their behaviors in their private and public lives around the world. Second, by designing evidence-based programs and resources targeting men and boys themselves, as well as the people and services in their lives. And third, by creating advocacy strategies aimed at moving policies and people, their perceptions, and their practices. Everything happens in partnership because we know changing these ideas is not something that we can do alone, nor is it a one-off. At Equimundo, we believe that promoting healthier boyhoods, investing in men's care for others, and creating opportunities for better connections online and offline is the way forward. And we would like you to join us in this mission. Equimundo, Center for Masculinities and Social Justice.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wessel, for showing this little video.
Thank
So
you, Sam.
I would suggest that we go to the interview part. So here we go, the first round. Alev and Wessel, please go ahead.
Yeah. So we already saw the video, which was a nice introduction to your organization, also the MenCare campaign. But perhaps just to hear from in your own words, Wessel, what is the main dream of the MenCare campaign, and what changes do you think are necessary to make this dream a reality?
Well, the video that we showed tells the story of Equimundo as an organization. We've been going since about 2009, working with partners around the world. And the particular project that we're going to speak about today more is the MenCare campaign, and the MenCare campaign for fatherhood, equality, and caregiving. But to start from a broader perspective of Equimundo as a whole, our vision is very much to see men as positive contributors to society, as to see boys also have the opportunities to flourish in terms of education, to have their emotional literacy be supported, and also to assist younger men to be much more connected socially and emotionally to those around them. So that are the three broad changes that we're seeing as an organization, working on masculinities and social justice for a number of years by now.
And why do you think these changes are necessary?
Well, I think a lot of our research and much of the research in the world shows a lot of evidence about what men are, the harm that men are causing, what men are doing wrong, basically. So, it's very clear that most violence that is used in the world is used by men. In many countries, that's true. Coincidentally, it's also true that most of the victims of criminal and military violence are also men. So, there's some of the harm that is caused by men, but also there are spaces where men are not stepping in as much as we would want us to. For example, in caregiving and in forming meaningful parenting relationships with children. So that is what we are trying to solve there. And yeah, I'm really happy to delve a little bit more into why we are approaching it in the way we are.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, because I'm sure you've done a lot of research and looked at, the why is it happening, and you've created and developed such an approach. How has that process been, and kind of adapting your approach and changing it as you go along?
Sure. So much of our work has, over the years, been focused on individual level change, where we do educational workshops in small groups. We do groups with fathers, we do groups with all parents, or we do we support individual counseling sessions. And increasingly, we saw in the early years that that was not enough, that you also need to work at the if you really want to achieve sustainable personal change in terms of men's position in society, you also need to work on the environments around men. And that environment is not only the the physical environment in terms of transport and brown infrastructure, but it also is related to the media that we are exposed to, the online conversations we are having, and very much at a longer term level, the policies that influence the services that people receive or the rights that they have access to in particular contexts. So in addition to personal level change, we've over the last few years expanded and improved our advocacy portfolio. And our advocacy, when we say advocacy, we don't only mean policies, but we mean moving people and policy. So it's very much about changing social norms through cultural influences like media, but also matching that with advocating for improved policies in various contexts. One very simple example is, well, not a simple example, it's actually quite complex, but one very apparent example for us is parental leave, and improving both the offer of parental leave in countries and the way that the policies are designed, but then also encouraging men, when the leave is available, to actually use it and to shift the norms of men feeling comfortable to take time off from work to be able to have that time to spend with their child.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a lot of, there's lots of different stakeholders and different change areas that you're looking at and different domains. So it's interesting to reflect on this. And you keep talking about the individual level change, and just to look at, to get a better understanding of this individual level change, I thought we could perhaps look at a video to get more, to see like some of the examples that you work on in this campaign across different geographies. So if you could be able to perhaps share that, and then we can continue the conversation.
Maybe before we show the video, this is an open invitation for the people who are listening in, who have tuned in on this webinar. Yeah, so you may already have some questions or observations, and while you look at the video, there may be other things coming up. Yeah, please share whatever you want to share in the chat box, and then after having watched the video, we will reflect on the key things that you have come up with. Yeah, so open invitation, and Wessel, if you're ready to show the video, please go ahead.
Sure. I just want to say something before I do, and that
Perfect.
is that we take a life course approach to our work, and in other words, we think about men in different stages of their life. And the video I'm about to share is of the MenCare Global Fatherhood Campaign, or Global Campaign for Gender Equality and Caregiving, which is the oldest or the longest standing campaign. The more we did research on that, the more we realized that we needed to start sooner. We needed to look at young men's social connection as well. But then we even heard that it's important to start even earlier than that, when gender norms are formed in the very early years. So we noticed a gap in programming for young boys after quite a lot of programming happens with early childhood development and before primary school starts. So between 4 to 9, we have a campaign focused on boyhoods. So I'm not going to talk more about that because we focused on MenCare, but just to say MenCare is one of 3 campaigns. The other 2 focused on young men and boys as well. So let me share the video about MenCare.
Minha mãe, uma vez, quando ele bateu na porta, minha mãe abriu, ele estava alcoolizado, estava bêbado, e deu um soco. Tinha que mostrar que ele era homem.
بمجتمعنا بطبيعة الحال الرجل هو رأس المرأة، يعني هي الفكرة اللي موجودة، والمرأة هي تابعة للرجل.
mbese abanza kuvuga ati niba umwohereje ku ishuri kikaba ikindi kibazo, numva cya gikomere cyanjye kirazamutse.
පිරිමියාය මේම තමයි ඉන්න ඕනේ. ඒ කියන්නේ ගෑනුන්ගේ වැඩ කරන්න කොහොමත් අකමැත්තේනේ. ඒ වුණාට මට මම අම්බ කරලා දෙනවා. එයා ගෙදර ඉඳලා කරනවා. ඒ ඔක්කොම එයා බලාගයි.
Eu ficava dentro do meu quarto, digamos assim, trancado. Não, isso aqui ninguém mexe. A partir daquele momento ali, eu vendo a história de cada um, aquilo ali me serviu para que eu pudesse ser curado daquilo.
මට ඉස්සරලාම පොඩ්ඩක් ලැජ්ජ වුණා. මේ මාස 3ෙම ගියා වගේ. වෙන එකක් මගේ තුල එඟට ආවා වගේ දැනුණා.
وبنتعاون مع بعضنا. وقتها هي بتكون أنا عندي شغل هي بتهتم أكتر، وقتها هي بكون عندها شغل كمان أنا بهتم.
umukobwa we yimubuhe buryo nyamara n'umukobwa wanjye nkumva ni ibintu nawe bimushimye kuba yarahindutse bifite umusaruro ushimishije.
Essa ferramenta é poderosa diante de uma comunidade de transformação. Ela não vem de um monte, ela vem pingo, 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 então torna aquele rio forte.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Wessel, for sharing this. Before the video, we said if you have any reaction, please share that with us in the chat box, and we'll have a quick round of reflections on what we have just seen and heard already from Wessel. I see many hearts popping up, Wessel, so that means that many people really enjoy the video and the discussion so far. So looking forward to reactions. Super powerful. That's Carol. Thank you, Carol, for sharing that. Yeah, and I agree with you, Carol, in this, because we use this during our trainings precisely because it is so powerful, because people, men and women, participants in our training, they can really relate to this topic, because gender, we say, is about who we are as human beings. And about how we relate to each other, how we relate to our children, to our grandparents, to our siblings, you name it. So that's also there. I see beautiful reactions coming up. Marlena, participants love it when we use it to show an example of change. Exactly. When we talk about theories of change, it is about not abstract change, it is about who is doing what differently. And we see men actually developing a different behavior. And as a consequence, we see also that women develop a different behavior and vice versa. So it is the interaction between the different groups that make it interesting. Aswani says, not sure if I missed the subtitles in the second video, but would have been nice to follow what was being said. Video is always a powerful tool. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I hope you will be able to later on see the video in your own time with subtitles, Aswani. Because we think it is really interesting what the people say from their own life experiences. So I think that is important.
I think we have a question from someone in the chat.
That is Hadi is asking the question, so I'm
there was a question right before from a colleague in Tajikistan. Yeah, from Nazira in Tajikistan.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Nazira, you have your question, but you didn't put it in the chat box. But Nazira, please open your microphone and ask the question. That's okay.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Actually, when I saw this advert coming up, and I thought that, well, this is a session that I have to be part of, because actually I used to work for Oxfam GB and was leading the unpaid care campaign as well, and a huge program. And actually my country, actually where we have very strong patriarchal setup, the society. And then I remember when we were trying to introduce the idea, there was a huge opposition to this issue. And then my question to Wessel would be that, if I'm not mistaken, you have worked or you're working in 55 countries across the globe. And in the video, I see that people from different countries because of the language differences. So have you ever worked in a very, very traditional patriarchatic society where your ideas, there were no way that they were accepted? And what was the challenge? How did you overcome them? How did you diversify your stakeholders or your kind of audience, to pitch and then get to the stage where you are now? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nazira. Wessel, would you like to respond?
Yes, of course. And I think a little bit of what Heidi was asking also in terms of how we enter a region with the campaign. So maybe just a clarification that the 55 countries that we are in has expanded now. Well, we have partners in actually more than 75 countries at this point. This video is a bit outdated, so the campaign has grown. And to be clear that we are the conveners of the MenCare campaign, but the campaign is driven by partners in countries. So we provide resources that partners adapt and implement in their own context. So we are mostly a research evidence to advocacy organization. So that's, if you were to ask me to summarize our theory of change, it's in 2 words, it's evidence to advocacy. So we do research first with local partners to really understand the local context, and we respond to the requests and the demands from local partners for adaptations of materials. So I think that also in terms of Nazira's question, there's no way that we can come with a international or a global assumption about what the local contextual needs are. So even if we move the needle even a little bit, if it's not a perfect gender equal society, none of us are perfect. We just want to move it the next step that's possible. And we do that grounded in what local partners are telling us that next step is. So we don't expect a perfectly equal sharing of unpaid care work within a week or 2 or a year or 2, but how we adapt the materials is dependent on our engagement with our partners. So just to say that in our programmatic work, we usually follow a 5-year process at least to really understand the context first, to develop materials, to have them validated, tested, and then only implemented. In our programmatic work, it's usually quite a long and slow process.
Wessel, can I ask you a follow-up question? Because I think what Nazir is also referring to is, can they approach you to see if they can become your partner?
Yes, of course, yes.
Because I think that makes it very practical. And so people, if you're really interested, then approach them and see how it works out. I think that's very nice.
So I will put the link in the chat for our website, and there's a form there that you can enter.
Okay. I see there's a question by Madalena from how do men and women react to the campaign in general, and how culture and gender plays a role in the reaction to the campaign? I think that's a very nice question. So, Wessel, what are your thoughts on this?
So, usually the response is quite enthusiastic. I do say that the idea that men can be positive contributors to society in terms of caregiving is usually very welcome. However, as a father and as a person who's involved in daily care work, I understand that there's a as T.S. Eliot said, between the idea and the action falls the shadow. That it's much harder to actually practice that. So after the initial agreement with the idea, both from men and women, to actually see sustainable change that's invisible to society, where it's not being profiled on a stage or getting lots of status in the neighborhood, but it's invisible in the household, that's much harder to achieve. And I think our colleague from Oxfam would know that with the unpaid care work and the rapid care assessment tools that you've used. So the reception is usually quite good, but then it does take sustained action over a longer term to actually achieve those changes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Wessel, for this. There's a very interesting also question from P. Purwasiningsi from Miserior in Indonesia. And says, when discussing issues of gender and social justice, here culture and tradition are often used as a shield for men to exert more power over women, leading to women consistently being in a subordinate and oppressed position. How can we transform culture and tradition into a positive strategy to support campaigns instead of them becoming obstacles? That's a good one. That's a good one. Wessel, what are your thoughts on this?
So, in the work that involves men for gender transformation, um, a slightly deeper level of what I've just explained, that men often show enthusiasm for this, is that I call it the knight in shining armor phenomenon, that men use this conversation as another way to consolidate patriarchy, that it becomes another way to say, oh, now I have the solution, I'm now going to solve violence against women. And the problem that arises there is that that's sometimes done in isolation of the experts on gender-based violence, who are often women and women's rights leaders in the field. So we try always to have all genders represented, not just the binary genders, but to have all genders represented in the conversations. In Indonesia, actually, in Yogyakarta, there's a network called Laki Laki Baru, or New Manhood, New Masculinities, which is one of our old, long-standing partners. They've done a lot of work within the formal institutions. So one entry point could be to work with service provision. The particular service that they are providing is providing counseling to families through police service centers, particularly to reduce violence and to prevent violence. And that seems to be quite successful, particularly because it's located within the formal institutional environment, where it's easy to document at least the way forward. I agree that it is a long and slow process to actually change culture, but we do believe that culture is possible to change. It is the culture that we are expressing at the moment, and we can change that.
Thank you, thank you. Then I would like to go. There's two more questions, and then we go to the next part of the interview that we are having. But in any case, if you have more questions, please feel free to raise them. But we will stick for two questions for the moment, and if there's more questions, we will have another opportunity. The first question is about, as working with young boys, that's from Dhruv, from Sequin NGO, working with young boys, what are the indicators that we can put or use in theory of change? And the other question is by Michigana, was there experiences of inclusion of PWDs and some intersectionalities? So two questions for you, Wessel, and then we continue with the interview.
Sure. There are several resources out there. Our website has lots of resources that are free and open source. One of the instruments that we've often used is the Gender Equality and Men Scale, the GEM scale, which it's a series of 10 to 18 questions that measure men's support for attitudes in support of gender equality. And it was developed in context of working with young men. Having said that, I want to say that this is this is a scale that was developed in Brazil, so it would need to be adapted, but it could be an example for other countries to think about how can you adapt and validate that in your context. The other one is the man box. So we developed a report on the restrictive norms that men often face that limit their contribution to society, that also impact their own mental health, things like those that were mentioned in the video. And this is, if you just look at our website and you look for the Man Box report, you will see some of the questions that we put in there. It basically is a self-reported survey that you can implement that can track some of those answers that will give you some sense of indicators that you can track on men's support for gender equality. Um, the second point is, I think we, in terms of working with genders, we work with all genders, we work with all sexual orientations and gender identities. We do, however, see a need to respond particularly to harmful masculinities, to restrictive masculine norms. So we do have that focus on that, but that is by no means to say that we are applying a binary lens to the work that we are doing. We have recently developed a wonderful curriculum. It's called Many Ways of Being, which actually responds to a diverse set of gender identities in terms of moving beyond restrictive gender norms. So I'd encourage people to have a look at that.
Okay, thank you, Wessel, for this so far. I would like to go to the second part of the interview. But in the meantime, I would like to reassure Gloria that she made a really nice comment in the chat box. I will come back to that later after the second part on the interview. Alev and Wessel, are you ready?
Sure.
If that is the case, then please go ahead.
Yes, and I was just going to say, I think it's nice to everything that you mentioned. To maybe we can collate it and then share it back with the people who are in the webinar. So I just wanted to, because I was also looking up some things as you were saying. It's and there's a wealth of information on your website, so that's great.
Sure. I'm happy to share specific links in an email after that you can send out to the respondents, just so we have the time to collect the right resources.
Perfect. We will do that. Yeah. So it was very nice to have this Q&A and delve in a bit more into the approaches and the strategy. I just wanted to come back to the theory of change and just the different components. So in our theory of change, and it's really nice to have this like real life example. So it's less theoretical, but we have this dream in the MenCare campaign which is focused on supporting helping men move past these legacies of violence and be equal caregivers. And then there's different pathways and different we call these pathways of change, so different strategies and approaches in achieving this dream. And there are a lot of assumptions, I feel like, that are made, and you work across so many different countries and different contexts. And I really wanted to delve a bit more into these assumptions when you are formulating your theory of change or your approaches, your strategic approaches. What are the most biggest, I guess, most significant assumptions that you had, and like how did you prove them, or were they like how did you go about dealing with the assumptions in the practice?
Sure. No, thanks so much, Alev. And when we have the funding and the opportunity and the time to deliberately develop a theory of change for a campaign or a project, we usually have half a day to talk through all of the assumptions, requirements, and conditions for the various outcomes that we have in mind. In response to this question, what I think about are two assumptions that were less contrived, or they were less deliberately thought about in an air-conditioned room. My colleague Jose, who's from Ecuador, was saying that there's a saying from the NGO movement in Ecuador that you shouldn't trust programs that were developed with air conditioning, because they are not grounded in the reality of people who actually benefit and are most involved in the changes that you're thinking about. Not to say there's anything wrong with air conditioning, but you get what I mean, that, the developmental world, we're so comfortable with putting post-its on walls in hotel conference rooms. So two assumptions to answer your question. The one was one that I have not thought about for a long time, but it's actually quite an important one. And I heard this from our colleagues in a wonderful organization in Brazil called Papa Jehomem, which means Conversations with Men. They are doing some wonderful films in Brazil on manhoods and boyhoods. And my colleague Guilherme, he actually said that in one of the workshops, he simply asked all the participants, male and female, the very simple question, can men change? Um, and it was striking, and I've also had the same experience in asking that question, how many people say, no, we work around men. Men are, in our conversation, we were saying that sometimes the kind of assumption is like men are like the weather. It's a variable beyond your control, like you just have to deal with whatever is going on in the men in the society. So you can work with how women can prevent, can respond to threats of violence. You can work with policies, but men are kind of a fixed variable. So our assumption in our work, a very fundamental, deep assumption, is that actually men can change. That it is possible for men to shift attitudes, behavior. And I have to say that over the years, we have proven that assumption correct, that men can change. We have seen that in a measurable way with some of the randomized controlled trials that we did in Rwanda with our partner Ramrik. We had the opportunity to do 2 RCTs 6 years apart with the same population, and it was wonderful to see that those changes were sustained. So there are some wonderful, nice journal articles about that if people want to go and have a look at those. But we're also seeing at a more anecdotal level that particularly men who are in charge of drafting policies can shift their attitude to how they frame policies. So it's not only at the personal level of individual change in caregiving or less use of violence, but also in how men do their work, particularly as those making decisions for the rest of society. So that's the first one. Yes, men can change. The second one was, I think, an assumption that we did not make deliberately, but looking back, I can see that this is an assumption that we might have made in the early years, and that is that men are only instrumental to gender equality. So we add men because we want to achieve gender equality. So we see that gender equality cannot be achieved by only working with women, but it's important to think about men's contribution to preventing violence, to contributing towards equal unpaid care work. But that's not a very it's a great message at a feminist conference to say that we are involving men to achieve gender equality. But if I step out of the air conditioning and I go and speak to a man on the street and I give him the message that I'd like you to become involved in contributing towards gender equality as my first question, it's unlikely that that man will respond in a positive way. If I say to him, would it be possible for me to support you to get a better relationship with your partner, to build a more meaningful relationship with your own parents or with your children? Those are more meaningful entry points. So the assumption that men are only instrumental was proven incorrect, that men are indeed instrumental to gender equality, but men also experience an inherent benefit, a very deep inherent benefit from being more involved in gender equality and particularly in care. Unpaid care work, the shift we've made is to only think about unpaid care work as the redistribution of unpaid care work amongst genders. We've expanded that lens to really add the dimension that men truly find purpose in caring relationships. And that's quite exciting.
Thanks, Wessel. And it's nice to hear. I mean, these are two really big assumptions that shape, the approaches and a bit of, the strategy you use in the different campaigns. I'm curious to hear, like, on a bigger scale, and perhaps you can just focus on one of the assumptions because both of them are quite large, on how did you use that for, like, learning purposes within the organization or within the campaign for future, like, building on that, and maybe more in a process way, if that makes sense.
Sure. No, we've adapted our strategy for sure. The one strategy that we've recently adapted is to think about how we involved influential decision makers in both government and business to support men's engagement in gender equality and in care, where from thinking that, for example, just to speak to the idea that men are only instrumental, so moving away or moving beyond asking business leaders to involve men in campaigns against domestic violence, to still keep doing that, but also to think about encouraging them, the men in the company, and also setting an example as senior men in a company to actually take parental leave, to talk about their families in the workplace, to break a little bit down this barrier between the private sphere at home and the professional sphere at work. So that's been a much more practical and it seems impactful way to approach working with businesses. We've also gone from one outcome of that is that we've gone from only setting up we have a platform, which is a wonderful platform. It's still available. It's called the MenCare Commitment, which is a commitment that we ask companies to make to create a more gender equal culture. That has not been very successful, mostly because we haven't really appealed to the personal interest that people have in caregiving. So we've expanded that idea of only asking for companies to commit to recruiting change makers who are already engaged in some work like that, and then appealing to them as individuals with influence to expand or to amplify the change that they already have. So the shift we have was from thinking about only a static invitation to commit to something that's quite abstract to much more of a personal conversation about, hey, in your family, what are you doing? How does this compromise your work life? How does your work life support your family life? And what can that mean for your employees? So we've gone from commitment, we've gone from commitment makers to change makers, and shifted from a very structural or abstract view to much more of a personal view.
I think that's really interesting, and I feel like I mean the more personal you get, and I mean at least the video you've shown, like I think everyone can relate to that, and I think it's such like a intrinsic and personal and sensitive topic that it's nice to have like a one-on-ones
exactly,
and then supporting this change maker. I know Sam is also a bit I know this is a one-to-one interview, but I'm sure Sam is itching to also maybe ask a follow-up question. I don't know, Sam, I just wanted to check in with you here.
No, well, I heard a lot of things that you were saying, Wessel. I really appreciate it, what I do really think is that you said, well, we changed our strategies on the basis of our learning. Was it difficult to realize that strategy? Was it difficult to make sure that your organization adapted one way or another, or did your organization itself adapt to make that change possible? Or was it, okay, we just do different things rather than, hey, we have to change ourselves in order to do different things?
Well, I mean, firstly, the world is changing faster and faster around us as we develop. So it's, post-pandemic and in the current geopolitical climate, all of these unexpected changes are coming up. I'm sure colleagues on the call are familiar with the nexus in terms of humanitarian response and developmental response, that the developmental work is no longer separate from humanitarian response. So in that context, the world is changing. To be honest, we were not very deliberate or conscious in predicting how we're going to implement the changes. We are simply going through a trial and error process to see what works. So we come up with a strategy, we try it, and then if it doesn't work, we iterate and we see what's the next change we can make. And I think that's how we came to the change maker strategy from the MenCare commitment strategy, is simply through trial and error and see what has the better response.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, Wessel. In the meantime, I'm inviting people again. So if you have specific things that you would like to ask Wessel, then go ahead. In the meantime, I would like to reflect a few things on the theory of change, and because Gloria was saying it already earlier, she was saying like, hey, it's clear that a lot of great work is being done, but I'm wondering whether there's a moment when they had to deliberately sit down and draft what that theory of change looks like, because this looks like nice in talking, but hey, did you formalize it in a visual, and what status did that have within your organization? Yeah, so I like Gloria's question in that regard. So can you say a few things about that, Wessel?
Sure. I I also understood that I'm not allowed to show slides on this call. So
Yeah,
so
exactly, Wessel. Maybe I'll explain the reason, because yeah, I think everybody thinks about theories of change as like technical instruments to plan, but we wanted to focus on the thinking, and that actually whatever we do, there's always is centered around, hey, if in a project or a program, we have an idea, we have a vision. Yes, we develop our thinking about what change is necessary in order to bring about the change towards the dream. Yeah, we think about our assumptions, we think about our strategies. Yes, and then we try and test the theory in practice. Now that's a little bit how you do things. That's why I also like that you use the term trial and error. But what you try is your best theory of what may work. Yeah, and then if the error is there, then you learn and you adapt. And you have been very clear in showing that you engage in what in beautiful terms would be mentioned as kind of adaptive management. But in any case, so is there a formal theory of change and do you adjust it?
Yes, no, there is absolutely, and I do think that for us, our theory of change is not a static page in our strategic plan that we developed 4 years ago, but it is a living visual representation of how we make sense of what we are doing. So it changes, I would say, 3 or 4 times in a year. We make a little tweak here or there and say, actually, this is how we are thinking about this right now, and this is how we are thinking about it right now. So it's not something that we change only when we change our strategic plan, but we have been quite, I think, quite engaged in making sense of how we see our changes in the world. So just to describe what we have, the societal changes that we hope to achieve are, as I've mentioned, it's at the individual level, it's also at the service provision level, but then at a more macro level, we're also thinking about policy and narrative shift changes. So when we speak about advocacy, we speak about moving policy and people. So that to talk about the change that we want to achieve, it's very much the personal, so moving policies and people and gender norms. So that's the change. We achieve that change through our programmatic and advocacy work. And that's the step in the middle that achieves that change directly. And before that, before we engage in programmatic or advocacy work, we start with research and evidence collection. So, so our theory of change is quite simple. It starts from collecting evidence, using that evidence to implement programs and advocacy, and then achieving those changes across that, basically a ecological system, a socio-ecological system, Bronfenbrenner, etc. And then there's one feedback loop, which is that in that implementation, we take the evidence of you doing that trial, learning from the errors and the successes, and using that as a source of evidence to enrich our research again. So it's a basic learning cycle. But that's the theory of change that we have landed on at the moment. I can show a pretty picture if you'd like me to, but I think I've also described it.
We can share that we can share that later, Wessel. Thank you for this.
Sure.
Before the time is going very quickly. We have about 8 minutes left. And I see a number of questions in relation to age. And the Silehuma says, in Bangladesh, we tried many approaches to bring men and young boys to discussion, but we find it very challenging to sustain their participation. So that's about young boys and men, men and young boys. And then it says India. Where I come from, men can change, but this happens mostly after a family crisis, but more often after age 55 or 60, when they are no longer in public or official roles. I'm above 60 and I'm a grandfather now, and I look at our grandson every Monday. Yeah? So it's also about grandfather care, I would say. Yeah? And then the question by Lakshmi says, which age group of men have you found the most success with in affecting change? So is there an age component to this in your view, Wessel? And how does that affect your strategy? I mean, you would like to influence young boys, men, grandfathers. I don't know. It's about men, but is there a difference in how you can influence different age groups in
Sure.
a sustainable way? As was mentioned also. Yeah.
No, and to be clear, the work with boys is to influence the adults in boys' lives. So we're not expecting any changes from boys. We just want to make sure that the educators and caregivers around boys are changing. I I would be I would be making a mistake if I say there's one particular age group that we see more success in. We have, of course, implemented more work with mid-20s to mid-40s, because that's the age when most people become parents. So because of most of our work is focused on fatherhoods, we have been able to achieve change there. But I think it's also really important to say that I think recent evidence is showing that brain plasticity does not stop at some point, that you can still change in your 50s, 60s, and 70s. I do want to confirm what I'm seeing from I think it was Nurul who made the point of India, that in my own doctoral research, I also saw that the fathers in the families that I was studying, they often, what actually led to real change was necessity rather than intent. So it was when they were forced to step in when the partner became ill, etc. But it is also really interesting to see that there's still a choice that you can either exit or you can actually decide to step in. And but there is a kind of an external trigger that makes it no longer optional for you not to be involved in caregiving. I think also it's really interesting to see how the attachment with the professional status is making a difference if you step out of the professional status, and that there's a difference in how possible change is between those two. That's really interesting. But I wouldn't be able to make a call on, let's focus on this age. One thing I do want to say is that, and this is something that we do quite deliberately, is that becoming a parent is a major life change, and that's a strategic opportunity to intervene in a man's life. So working through antenatal facilities, working through fathers groups, through maternal centers, that's a key moment to intervene, and ideally intervening before the child is born. So when the partner is expecting a child is a strategic moment. So that's not attached to age, but it is attached to that life change of becoming a parent. If you are able to make a connection, an emotional, meaningful, caring connection between a father and a child before or at the time of delivery, then you've got a much better chance of retaining that involvement over the year, than rather than trying to get fathers involved again if they've been able to give distance.
That's so wonderful. I realize there's so many things that we, men and women, may learn from you in this regard, regardless of the age group in which we are. But hey, time is coming to an end, well, I would like to say a few things more about theories of change, but I would like to leave it at, hey, we have heard Wessel talk about dreams. We have talked about the necessary changes. We have talked about strategies. We have talked about key assumptions. A man can change. I think that's a real nice one. Yes, and that you have to look for inherent benefit. That is now the key change that you had from assumptions from men are instrumental. So it's about learning, and you have proven one way or another, Wessel, with your organization, that you are a learning organization. So I find that really, really wonderful. I would like to leave it at that for the moment. For the people who have listened to everything that Wessel has been saying, and the interview that Alev has been doing. If you talk about gender, I would like to bring to your attention that we have two courses in which we deal with theories of change, and gender as well, and that is our gender mainstreaming course. Now, I'm not sure if Alev can share the link.
Yes,
To
Carol
this.
already shared.
You have already shared that.
I already
Wonderful.
shared the link.
Yeah. So okay, Carol will share the link. You want to show it, Carol, or you want to just share it?
I already shared the link. People can access it and also have like, more information.
Ah, wonderful. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's 3 links in the chat box. One is to our gender mainstreaming course. The other one is our monitoring, evaluation, and learning course. And there's a booklet on theories of change, so how to develop it. So if you are interested in knowing more about the steps that need to be taken in order to develop a theory of change, you can download this document and use it. And of course, feel free to contact us if you need any help. Yeah, that's about it. Did you also share Equimundo? Yeah, the Equimundo website is there. And I would like to ask you, I hear a tremendous echo. I'm not sure where it comes from now, but I would like to ask you if you have any specific wish for Equimundo, for Wessel, or for MDF. You can share that in the chat box and we'll see what happens. And in the meantime, Wessel, maybe you would like to say a few closing remarks from your side to the group of people that participated in this webinar.
Well, what I'm left with is just a reflection on my own experience as a father, as a dad, with my son, with my daughter, and the fact that this change is so personal. It's not only something out there in the communities we serve, but it's a change that first has to happen in oneself to be able to legitimately then ask others to do that. And that has been my main challenge. And I wish everybody good luck with that, to change caregiving dynamics in your own life as a learning laboratory for trying to implement that in the work that we do.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Wessel. I see there's a number of comments here. Great and interesting discussion.
Everyone's keen to learn.
With power. Sorry, Alev, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just, no, all the comments are live. Just very, very keen to learn and I think read more and get resources from Equimundo. So
okay, all right.
Perhaps you'll be hearing from a few of the participants.
Wonderful. You are very welcome.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you so much. I'm not going to read all the comments in the chat box, but we can also share that with all of you. So I hope you have enjoyed this webinar. It was a new format for us, but I'm really happy that we have had the chance to learn from Wessel and to see that a learning organization is not an illusion. It is possible, and I think that is something that within our work we really would like to stimulate everybody to think about. Learn yourself, but learn as organizations and make sure that your theories are tested in practice and that you learn from your own experience. Okay, thank you so much. Have a nice day, and we hope to see you again during another webinar. All right.
Thanks all. Thank you, Wessel.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.